Good evening and welcome to the January 15th, 2025 meeting of the Needham Finance Committee. We are operating the meeting in a hybrid mode, so welcome. We don't have any members because Lydia wasn't diving in, right? Okay. So first, order of business, are there any citizens to address the finance committee? Seeing none, we'll move to approval of the minutes of last week's meeting. Did everybody have an opportunity to review those minutes?
I did, I didn't have any comments. Molly did a great job on them. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I move their acceptance.
Second.
Since no one's on the line, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Minutes approved. The first order of business is to discuss planning and community development.
Okay, I can introduce it. Natasha and Artie are here. It's tab 7 in our book. So, Tina and Ally and I, did a Zoom call with, Lee a couple weeks ago, and she was kind enough to, spend time with us and go through the budget request and answer questions we had. I'll, kind of give a high level overview of the budget request and the various activities that take place in the department, and then I'm sure, Natasha and Artie can, add things in as they feel the need to. So in this, the planning and community development, I'll just call it, it has 3 divisions within it. One is the planning, second is conservation, and the third is the Board of Appeals. Those activities are all covered within this budget line item. The FY 26 budget request has 2 components. One is an increase in salaries that are for the employees in the department, which is up just 4.1%, which equates to $23,000. And then expenses are up 23%, which is $9,000, for a total requested increase of 5.3%. There are 2 DSR 4s, which are part of the FY 26 budget request. And they are both carryovers from at least last year, if not the year before as well, but certainly from last year.
Last year.
And one of those DSR 4s is to a new position for a planner. And the projected salary or the requested salary for that position is $85,000. And then with the benefits, that adds on an additional almost $37,000 for that requested position. And we'll ask to hear more about that when I'll turn the floor over to those all. And then the other DSR 4 is to hire a part-time non-benefit position in the administrative office. Right now, there's administration services has 27.5 hours. This budgeted DSR 4 request would bring it up another 10 hours. And the projected cost as requested in the budget is for $14,100. Just to give people an idea of the number of employees in the department, in conservation, there are 2 FTEs plus, believe it or not, a 0.37 FTE administrator. I always wonder what a 0.37 person must look like, but I know they're completed in other ways. And then in the planning department, there are 2 FTEs and a 0.36 administrative position. And as I said, one of the things we asked about at our during our meeting with Lee was, as you recall, last May at town meeting, there was a warrant article to appropriate $80,000 for planning department to use for planning consultants. And our question was how much of that has been used so far in this fiscal year, and, is there going to be a request to, supplement that in any way, at the upcoming town meeting? And the responses were that about $5,000 of that amount
Yes.
has been spent so far. There's some plans for the remaining amount, to be spent. But it's felt that the remaining amount is sufficient to, not require a warrant article, in this upcoming town meeting, at least with respect to this, particular, planning consultant fund source. So I think that is an overview. I hope I was correct in how I presented it. And, I think the committee would most likely like to hear, is there anything different this year about the DSR4 request than last year or the years preceding? And then just to give some overview as to the need for that request.
Okay, well, the request for both of those positions is pretty much what the request was last year. I mean, you have a planning department now with two full-time professional people that are effectively doing the work, I would say of three people. And we've been able to do it, but there's a lot of demands that are being placed on the department and expectations in terms of work that the town wants to see done, coming from the planning board, coming from the select board, coming from other boards. And just coming out of the MBTA Communities Act, which is really eaten up most of the staff time over the course of the last year. And we are anticipating having to develop design guidelines, and we're also anticipating having to do some zoning modifications to correct some inconsistencies that are kind of embedded in the overall zoning framework as a function of these changes. In addition, the planning board has identified a number of different projects they want to pursue. They want to look at rezoning within Needham Center. They want to look at doing a parking study for the down. And so it's felt really that we just haven't really been able to meet the demands, or two people are actually doing the work, I would say, of three people. So that's the reason for adding an additional planner. That person would actually be involved in the permitting load in large part, and would assist Alex and I in that, and then that would free Alex and my time up to actually work on the planning projects that the town wants to advance. And if you wanna.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Lee. In most cases, we have initiatives that we have we have to push out for another year because we don't have the capacity to do it. And then there are some projects that are coming in that need additional review that we have to push 2 or 3 meetings beyond because there's just not enough time. So
So is this a position that existed at one point and was taken away, or is it would be a brand new?
It's a new position. This position has never existed. So we've had, I think the role started with just myself in the planning department. And then a planner was added, Alex was added about 10 years ago. But now the obligations of the department, I think the expectations for the department have really increased. And it's really difficult to really do it with two people and do it with two people effectively. And so this past year, all the time, really all the time was spent on hone and all that work that just led to the vote last night. So the work on the large house study committee got delayed. Work on the parking study got delayed.
the Needham Housing Authority was something that took up a lot of time.
The Needham Housing Authority took up a lot of time with their whole rezoning proposal. And so what ends up happening is there are other priorities that the town has that just don't get advanced in the timeline. I think the town expects them to be advanced. So,
I'd like to, may I chime in for a second? So everything that Lee is saying, everything that Tasha is saying. This is something where, when the planning board, as the phrase goes, the planning board is supposed to plan, we wind up not planning because we don't have the time or the resources to do some things we want to do. We're talking about some of the projects, a few projects that were mentioned here. I would like to look at, and as mentioned before, I'd like to look at some projects over in the Staples area. You do it Staples area. I think we can see that planning can make a big difference. The right planning, if we have enough timeline, the right planning can make a big difference in the finances of the town and which direction we're going and where we can do some things effectively. So it would be really nice if we had the resources to do it. I'm not one for spending money without really thoughtfully, do we need it? Do we need the resource to actually plan something? Because I don't think we have the resource to actually really effectively plan for what the town needs, is that we need more than what we have, I believe. For planning resources, I truly believe that.
Lee, what do you expect the impacts of the results of the election to be on the department,
Well,
if any?
the recent election, I think,
What
well.
happened yesterday?
Well, yesterday, I mean, we will be redoing, of course, the zoning. It will be going to town meeting. We will be involved in doing all of that. I think we expected out of that, that we would be required to develop design guidelines for these individual districts to more articulately, to basically more clearly articulate what the urban design framework is going to look like in those districts. We wanted to see or confirm which model we were going forward with before we proceeded with that. So that's going
Which
to
we had
happen.
to do anyway. Yeah, it just depended on the model.
Depending on the model, and I think there are also some tweaks, I think, that probably are gonna need to be made in the zoning framework itself as a function of these changes, just to make sure there are no internal inconsistencies as a result of the modifications that are being made as a function of the MBTA Communities Act. So those three things are gonna fall out of this whole MBTA zoning profile. And, you know, depending upon what the town decides to do, if they wanna look at some of the districts that had recommendations or just to study further in terms of what the neighborhood plan had recommended. Maybe there are components of that the town would feel comfortable advancing for different neighborhoods. So I think to look at those different areas, the Chestnut Street corridor, the business district where maybe Bertucci's is located. Maybe there are some things embedded within that context that makes sense to advance and further study.
Can I add something to it? Also, we also, during the entire MBTA communities, review, we also, there was a group that wanted to see what was happening at Hersey. There was also a group that wanted us to look at Crescent Street. There were a couple of lots that they would like for us to change. So there's all these pieces, but we've been lucky that in some ways that we haven't had a lot of development because that all stopped with the state of the economy and with the lending, as it is right now, that we've been able to do all this with the two people doing the work of three people. Once we have 2 or 3 projects, including Muzzy and a couple of others, that have delayed their permitting for 2 years and we've approved it. So within the next year or two, we're gonna see a lot of new development in addition to all the work that she's doing.
So if I understand it, this would be I'll use hierarchy. I'm not trying to use it in a negative way, but this person would be sort of the third person, right? So it's not so much that that person, he or she would be doing the development work. It would be more like this person would be doing work that you and Alex are presently doing to free the two of you up to do what you're describing. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's a fair characterization. It would free us up to work on these other projects.
Well, I mean, it's a team collaboration towards some degree, obviously hierarchical, but it's also a team collaboration. You have to have enough people on the team.
And how does the consultant fit into all this?
Yeah.
We hire consultants for things that, you know, to augment us. So we hired a traffic consultant, for example, on home. On Muzzy, we hired somebody to do the fiscal impact study. So it really depends on what skills, you know, that we don't really have at that level. We're not traffic engineers, for example. So we hire companies to augment the work that we're doing.
But not to do the basic planning work that you guys.
Not to do the basic planning work.
You've also gotten grants.
And we've also, we've gotten grants, we've applied for a grant, you know, to assist us with the parking study that we want to do. We got a grant to actually assist us with the money we spent for RKG to assist us with all the planning for Hone. So we do reach out for grants and to hire consultants to complement our work. But overall, I mean, we understand the town and we have to manage these consultants to actually run those planning processes in a way that you want to see them advance, because we understand what the politics are in Needham, hopefully, and how the system works here.
Do you have the consultant money earmarked for anything upcoming?
I do hire yes, part of that 80,000, I think we're planning on using to hire an urban design firm to help us with actually develop the design guidelines for those districts.
I think if we step back a few years, and if I mean, Needham is a fairly large town. We have a lot going on. And if we step back a few years and say, okay, what could have happened if we had a larger, more robust planning department, so we could have work on the projects we wanted to work on? Where would we be if we had started a few years ago? Then say, okay, where would we get there? If we start now, where will we be? Because we're not talking for 1 year. I believe we're not talking for 1 year. We're talking, Needham is a substantive town. And where do we need to grow effectively for our town? And, I think if we had something a few years ago, perhaps we would have been better off than we are now. And so I don't think, I think we want to think of that when you're going forward, because we'll be better off now. We'll be better off in 2 years or 3 years if we have something more now. I think that's one way of looking at it also.
I think we asked that during our meeting, like what had this, or had this position been funded last year, what maybe would we have seen additional that you weren't able to accomplish?
Well, I think we would
We
have
talked
started
about
the
the
large
design
house,
guide,
we would
yeah.
have started the large house study committee last year. We wouldn't have waited to start it
Yeah.
when the homework ended.
Yeah.
And maybe would have had more resources when the MBTA Community Act was coming in, but that whole process was going on. What difference that would have made, I have no clue. But
We would have started the parking also.
yeah, I mean,
We're all spread thin also on the board. We can barely like, everybody's kind of dividing and conquering to create these different committees, but we need their support.
and
And
it
it's been
allows,
pretty thin.
we had Lives House Review Committee. We have a second meeting where we're putting projects on the already as far as what we need to do. And I think, a lot of us hear the issues going on around town, the complaints and issues people have, but we have to come back to town meeting with something very thoughtful. That'll make a difference and will also pass. And, that's just one of many. I mean, it's a big thing where that people see affected people, but it's one of many things which have to happen around the town to support a proper growth of the town, or whatever happens needs to happen.
Lee, excuse me. Where can you easily find somebody to fill this position? And is it, it sounds like it's a more junior position. So given the constraints on your and Alex's time, would you have sufficient time to mentor this person? Like, how would that?
I anticipate this person having a master's degree in planning. So I'm not looking for somebody, it's certainly them, but they might be someone that's maybe 2 years out in their career or 3 years out in their career, but I certainly want somebody with at least 2 or 3 years planning experience and with a master's degree.
And are they readily, like, can you find somebody within?
I haven't advertised, I don't know. I've never had trouble getting a planner in Needham. In large part because Needham's a nice town to work in. It's a nice place to start your career. It's viewed as a positive place to work. I was running a program where I was getting folks from Harvard and from MIT just to come in to work for me in almost a clerical position for 2 years before I got Alex. Because of how Needham was perceived. And the kinds of planning work and opportunities we give people. I haven't advertised it for this kind of role for a while, but I don't anticipate having a problem.
Just out of curiosity, do you know how other towns are structured, in terms of size of planning departments?
I know Wellesley, I think, has 3 people over there. And Lexington, I believe, has 3.
So you were kind enough to put together the information we requested about sort of just compiling amongst the 3 groups, the number of meetings you've had, the number of applications that have come in, the number of decisions you've rendered, sort of, we put together sort of a whole menu of different things. Yeah, and what struck me was, actually, the numbers are going down, because if you add them all up and just, I'm looking at what you sent to us of the 4 boards and committees, in FY 21, the total number of applications reviewed, decisions was 321. We're down to 272 in FY 22, 249 in FY 23, and then down to 218 in FY 24. And it's consistent through each of the divisions that the numbers go down over the time period. So those numbers don't present your case. So I think I think your case is presented the way you're articulating about things you haven't got to or projects you haven't gotten to, but the numbers themselves don't, as presented in that fashion, don't justify that there's more work right now than there was in FY 21. So, I just would, if you could probably just give us a little bit more idea, you don't have to do it now, but I think as we're going through this budget hearings, and it'll come as no surprise to you that every group that comes to us wants more people, and they have work that they're not getting done, and they have very compelling reasons, everyone does. So I think it would be nice just to have a little bit of a supplement. You gave us the numbers, which I asked for, and you gave them, and they were great, but I think it would be nice to have a little bit, some concrete exactly what it is and the things that this new position is gonna allow your group to do collectively. That's just
Can I
my
add
request.
to this a second? One of the reasons why it's been going down, again, it's because lending is so expensive right now. It's continued to be, and we're seeing all these projects that were coming to us, not coming back. I think that gave an opportunity with this MBTA community and with 1688 Central and all these other projects that were happening that took up a lot of time to take up a lot of her time. Now with these other projects that are gonna probably start coming in, I think it's gonna switch back to higher numbers. I'm just estimating, but I think that gave, the state mandates took up a lot of her time that normally projects that are being permitted would have taken, but the economy hasn't been helping on those.
So I was at the building department last Friday, I believe. So Mohan and I were there talking about the large house review committee, because Joe Project asked us to come in. And he was telling us that the permits are down. They're down reasonably so in the past years, and again, the economy. So I think it's important to note why they're down and that they're not gonna stay down, and that now is a really good time to plan to make sure when things come into town, we're ready for them. That's what we have to do. We have to be ready when things come back. And planning, that's what we need to do. We need to plan when the economy's swinging back. So we're not caught off guard or have something that comes in that we don't want. We have to be
It
ready
would be
for it.
good if you could just define that a little bit more. I'm not asking for it tonight, but
Yeah.
just to say you want to plan in and of itself.
Well,
is it really-
we're
Doesn't
talking.
say anything to me.
Well,
So I
well,
just
we're,
think-
we're, we're,
let me finish. You just,
Sorry.
so I just like to get something a little more concrete, exactly what it is that you want to do, whether it's specific sites or whatever. And I'm not saying me, but I'm sure other people in the
No,
community the same way.
I'm thinking of almost like a project plan, so I'd like to do that, 'cause then this is gonna take 3 months and start, ideally, you would start it now and end it, if you had the third person, maybe you could just look at it that way.
We
What
have a
you-
big calendar, yeah, a
So-
calendar of initiatives, and then we also have calendar, we also have projects that stopped that probably will restart.
Good, that would be helpful.
Maybe like a comparative of like 2 people, this is what we get done for the next year or two. 3 people of the projects we have, these are the ones that we think we can reasonably get done. Just for us to know. It
Right.
sounds like you already have that
Mhm.
plan, so just understanding how much faster it might be put into motion.
Good. And is it possible at all to get a master's level intern in your group? Have you ever had any intern assistants that would develop into a potential planner? Is that ever an avenue that you looked at?
I haven't used interns much, no.
Is that something that other, municipal departments do?
I think I was reluctant to bring in a person that didn't have a master's degree, in large part because I was spending all this time teaching them. So I always wanted to have somebody with a master's degree in planning and who was coming out of a top school, because I was really getting high level skills and I was paying them really like as an administrative person. But no, I haven't used them in large part because they're mostly coming in as people with an undergraduate degree in planning, and I just didn't feel I was getting enough high level skill to justify the time I was spending overseeing them.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I have no idea, and I apologize how long it takes to get a master's in planning, so somebody maybe between year 1 and year 2, or in the midst of getting the master's, that.
The thing is, they don't have any real life skills.
They just don't, and
So
you're,
unless you do a co-op, Northeastern has a co-op program possibly, or something like that, but in general, you need the degree and you need an internship during the plant, once they get out of school to do the real life work versus theory.
Great. Any other questions?
Thank you.
So you need from us, basically kind of list of coming up.
Plans.
What we'd like to do and what we're not.
And we're not just picking on you guys.
We'd like to.
Everyone comes to us and we say that, they're variations of the same thing, so it's just not you guys.
I get it. I get it, John, you guys are great.
Things you can do to support your case, obviously, it means it's hopeful. And it's really for your benefit. Yeah,
Thank
it's like
you.
kind of like what we go through this plaintiff department, right? They have a specific project in which who's assigned to the project, how long the project's gonna take. I realize that's not necessarily as easy for your department. But, obviously to help bolster your case, things like that would be very helpful.
I think it's the estimating of the permitting that's coming. I think the projects are easier because you know how long, we set timelines for those. But it's the
Right.
permitting that's coming in. We just have to look back at all the projects that have been put aside temporarily.
Is there something in the market or like that you have an indicator that you feel like things are gonna come rushing back?
They're not
next year?
rushing back at any point. But
Yeah.
but we have people that have permitting for 2 years that don't want to let that go, so they're gonna try to find financing. We're
Okay.
already seeing,
So you,
in
there's
the
an
market,
expiration of the permit.
well, they've already extended it the 2 years.
Okay.
And for a couple of the biggest projects in town, and so we are seeing, I mean, you can read it, in the paper. There's lending that's happening for office buildings now, which wasn't happening for the past 4 years. And so I think something's gonna happen with Muzzy, and they're gonna come up with lab buildings are not happening anymore. They're gonna come up with a different proposal. They're gonna have to do community meetings again and all of that,
Do they
so.
have a date when their permit or like?
Yeah, there's a date when the permit expires, and Needham Housing Authority also extended, right, or,
Right.
and,
And 100 West is certainly gonna be redeveloped, and that's gonna take a lot of time.
so there are like a couple of really big projects that have a lot of community input and all of that, that are on hold, let's say. And who knows when they start, it all depends on their lending situation. But I just,
And they have, none of them have indicated, other than 100 West, have indicated to you that, like, they're gonna come back within the next.
they don't know, but I can tell you they wouldn't be extending if they thought they couldn't do it at all. They would just let it die.
And they're retaining all their rights on those sites.
Yeah, unless they want to sell it.
They're being
Right.
optimistic, right? But either way, if you sell-
That's why they're,
Right, but if you
it's an
sell-
asset, it's an asset thing, but
Yeah.
who's gonna let an asset go away?
But if they sell it, the other person, for the money they invested, will want to develop it. So I'm just seeing it just in my field. I mean, I'm an architect, for those of you that don't know. And all of my developer projects have been stopped, but I've been hearing rumblings of some of them starting up again.
Yeah, well, Northland just started over and.
So it's happening. It all depends on their situation and on their project type. Housing obviously is big right now, but lab buildings, there's an overdevelopment. So I know that
The
we're gonna,
Wingate project just started too.
and Wing Bay. So we're just gonna start seeing a lot more. Anyway. I don't have a magic ball, but I can just tell you that we knew that this year, that it was gonna be a little slower there, but we were so busy with everything else.
So we were lucky.
Well.
In some
Some of
way,
us were lucky.
two of us were lucky in the department.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
That's good.
Thank you. The next, is the first half, I'll call it, of townwide expenses. Ally and I met with Kate, Katie, Dave, Celia excuse me, this Monday. I feel it.
It's only Wednesday.
It was a year ago.
To go over, some of the townwide expenses, so. And obviously, some of these increases, are pretty significant, many of them, for competitive reasons that, the town of Newton has very little control over, but let's start with group health, I'm doing these in pieces, so. Group health insurance, employee benefits, and administrative costs, are increasing by 10.7%. That is largely due to continued consolidation in the insurance providers in the healthcare industry and healthcare costs continuing to rise. The town has been very good about offering kind of high quality, high deductible health plans and in an opt-out program with an incentive. And that has been successful. But, this budget is, as I said, projected to increase by 10.7%. Next is the OPEB, Retiree Insurance Liability Fund, and whenever we talk about OPEB, as I mentioned, I really miss Dick Riley. So the OPEB expenses are increasing by 5%, and that is really a function of, what we have to fund to get to our funding rate of, where are we at? 70, excuse me, the funded ratio of 49%. We're using a 6.625 discount rate for 2026. And the town hopes to reach full funding in 2041. At which point I will probably not be reviewing this budget, but, so, and in terms of our funding rates relative to other towns, and please, pipe in if you can, Dave, the funded ratio of 49% is certainly an improvement, and would you say we're at the middle of the pack relative to other municipalities, or no?
We're way high.
Or we're way higher?
We're much higher than many communities, because of our funding level. But of the communities that are probably comparable to us, we're probably in the 75 percentile. What I mean by other communities that have been aggressive on, getting their liability paid down.
There are only 10, as of the 2021 data, that's the last available data, there were only 10 communities that had a higher funded ratio than Needham. And 8 of them had a higher discount rate.
It's funny how that works.
Is,
But they were substantially higher, some of them, right? Like
Uh,
100 basis points?
You
or-
were looking at the retirement, so on the OPEB, the highest is 7%. A number of them are at 6.75.
Okay.
is there a minimum that has to be put away, or is it all somewhat discretionary and trying to maintain our policy?
There's no statutory minimum like there is for the pension,
Mhm.
yes. But the community has been funding from the required contributions since 2008.
Okay, in terms of retirement assessments,
I'm sorry, one more question. What has
Go
been
ahead.
our actual sort of return experience over the last 5 years?
Can you? Katie, can you hand that?
For OPEB,
Yeah,
we have the rate of return on pensions. This is the funded ratio for
Oh,
OPEB.
funded ratio.
Yeah, but I can say for the most recent report,
oh,
You're looking for the return in this. Yeah, it's the same system, so.
oh,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
yes, thank you for
You're
the
welcome.
clarification. Yeah,
Yeah.
so why not I just hand this out now?
yeah. that works.
Yeah.
That's like, well, we're doing much better than our, we just don't get reviews.
So the 10-year chart that's coming around, we invest pension and OPEB and PRIT, state-run fund. So on the left side, we have the actual rate of return over the last 10 years. There's a discrepancy between the calendar years and the fiscal years because we were trying to equate, what year of data did we have that informed which fiscal year? So that's the lag there. So then in comparison to the, what's listed here is the Needham, the pension discount rate, but just to give you some sense. So the 5-year comparisons in the earlier years, 2014 to 18, our discount rate was higher than the
Right.
returns. In the last 5 years, it's flipped. But in the 10-year comparison, they've come, they're closer together.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And you're not anticipating, Dave, a change in the discount rate?
Not one that would impact FY 2026. And, once we get the updated actuary, which should be in the next 4 months, we'll have a better sense of what 27 would be.
Mhm. And do you think you would go lower than the 6.25 or?
The, that's what I'd be testing, because ideally when we have been reducing it, we've been trying to reduce it where it doesn't increase the annual contribution by a significant amount. We're trying to work the balancing
Mhm.
both.
Oh,
So that's why
okay.
we've been very strategic on our reduction and not just arbitrary on the reduction.
Mhm. And then in terms of, retirement assessments, that is increasing by 8%, and the cost of that appropriation, the requested appropriation is 14.4 million for retirement assessment. Again, that discount rate is at 6.25%, and the funded ratio is 77.4%, but that was as of a year ago, and you won't know what
No.
that number is. Okay, so that's a 2-year.
It should be a little higher, I would think, just because your returns are higher than the discount rate. Obviously.
Correct. But we're not gonna know anything that will impact FY.
And then you expect that to be fully funded by 2031? Is that
It's 32.
32?
Yep.
Workers' compensation is going up by 3.5%. However, the caveat there is oh, that doesn't include anything from public safety, right?
No, public safety is under the 111 Act.
Okay, all right. Injury on duty and reserve, that is increasing by 5%. And just remind me, Dave, there's a mention here that the appropriation for FY 25 was 165,792, and to date, 48,824 has been expended, so.
I
Is that-
would defer to Kitty.
In terms of the balance for 25.
Yeah,
Yeah, so anything that isn't spent can be put away for a large claim if we ever were to get one. So the balance that's unspent in the fiscal year rolls into the 111F fund.
okay.
Um,
Alright. And classification and performance and settlements is basically a reserve for funding personnel items that occurred during the fiscal year. So for this year, this would include the police union and police superiors officers union. And those negotiations have begun. Is that
Next
right?
week, next week.
Next week they start. Okay, I thought that when I was in there, was it supposed to start sooner or? Okay. And do you expect that those will be concluded by town meeting or?
That's our goal.
It always is.
But many times we don't get there, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And that's really it. So if we have, the one thing I did want to ask you, and maybe Kate, you can just mention that, is the study that you're doing for health insurance costs and the consultants that you might be hiring to do that.
Sure, we've just drafted a request for proposals for consultants, and we're doing this in combination with the town of Dedham. Because they're sort of the same size as we are, a little bit smaller, and they're another member of the West Suburban Health Group. So West Suburban Health Group is a consortium of communities that band together to purchase health insurance. A number of communities in West Suburban Health Group are trying to figure out whether this is still the best place for them. And we have heard from our employee groups that, you know, year over year, in the last couple of years, 10% or 12% increases in rates is just really very difficult for everyone. So it's also true for the town expense budget. So we have a series of questions that we'll be asking the consultant to look at as to what are the other options that the town has, what would be the financial implications, but as importantly, what would be the implications for our individual subscribers, both active and retiree, in terms of if we were to switch to the state's group insurance or to our insurance provider who offers a plan. Is it, you know, you couldn't use the BI or couldn't use Newton Wells. I mean, we need to know all of these things so that we can make appropriate choices. So we expect that report to inform the FY 27 budget.
And we've been part of this group for how long now?
I think 2005,
Oh, it's been that long? Okay. I thought it was, I didn't think it was that long. Because there was, at one point, I thought the premiums went down. We made some changes several years ago.
Yeah, we've made a lot of changes. We had regular HMOs and then we changed them to a little bit of a more streamlined HMO, which saved a little bit. It didn't lower our costs, but it lowered the rate.
Right.
Then we added, in 2018, we added the high deductible plans. We actually have a 50-50 split of our employees on the high deductible plans, which even with the incentive to the health savings account that the town provides, is a significant savings for the town to have that many employees in that plan.
I have two questions, if I could, on the big nut, which is the health insurance. Am I correct that this is sort of your placeholder in the sense that because you're still negotiating, or not negotiating, but you're still trying to find out what the actual rate is gonna be? And is there any sort of time frame on that? That we'll know whether the placeholder, we might be able to adjust it either in a favorable or a negative way?
The final rates we'll know in March. So this is a placeholder. We base this budget on a 10% increase over the current year rates. From FY 24 to 25, the rates went up. We have Harvard Pilgrim went up about 12% and Blue Cross Blue Shield between 8 and 9, depending on the plan. And I think the other thing built into this, and this is an assumption, we could add 10 employees to our total enrollees. Last year we added 18, but if you look out the 10-year average, it's 4.8. So we're assuming adding 10 more. And yeah, so that's answers the timing question.
Okay.
I'd say the other thing that is a factor here that we've been grappling with, but is going to hit this budget and maybe not future, is Tufts and Harvard merged. And so we had, I think, 70 employees on Tufts. They had to pick between the other two plans. Of the three, the Tufts had been our cheapest for them, but also for the town. And so there's this added cost of those 70 shifting to higher cost plans that we wouldn't see as mark of an increase generally for that reason moving forward.
Can I add to that? They were not only the lower cost plans, but they switched to plans because of the quirk in our system that we pay more for. So.
Has the demographics changed materially in the last 5 years in terms of make up younger employees that you'd think we'd have to pay less for insurance? Or is that? I just
In
know on the
terms of-
corporate side, I've got, a number of people, small businesses, as their demographics shift to younger employees and help. It's very beneficial from a health insurance standpoint.
Right. I mean, I think obviously we look at our total census, but also the split between individual and family. And obviously family plans are more expensive for the town. So let's see, we are at a 50-50 split, and that was about the same last year. So we could look at that trend more over the longer term.
50-50 individual
And family, yeah.
But I would think that the rise in the high deductible plans, wouldn't that be reflective of a moving into a younger demographic or?
If I may, it typically younger demographic and an older demographic, people who have 3 kids in middle school tend not to be in the plan, so, or if they play hockey, you know, that kind of thing, because the people worry about the deductible. But you do tend to see it in the younger end and the older end. But
Okay,
it's an interesting point. We will have, our OPEB report actually shows, age ranges, I think. We can get that for you, what the changes have been.
But I know we've had a fair amount of turnover the last 5 years, retired in lots of, retirements and.
They're also seeing
Right.
school go up and town go down, I love that, so that increases in numbers of subscribers within the students.
We can get that.
and you don't anticipate any changes in these offerings going forward with the negotiation that the schools are entering into with the teachers union? I mean, this is what it is, right?
This is what it is.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll have the other set of
Well-
council expenses at a later date.
The other set of townwide expenses is at a later date when we are meeting next week.
Be there an early night and. Yes, I-
You, yeah, I know. It wasn't as late as it could have been.
Are we not? Yeah. Thank you.
I like the ones that sit in the hole. Here.
Thanks. Have a good one. Do you want to, do you have anything to update on schools?
And so, Tina, Joe and I had a liaisons meeting with the, schools on yesterday morning. And we're gonna have another meeting with them Tuesday night at 5:30 prior to their, school committee meeting next Tuesday night, in which they're gonna potentially vote on their budget request. And then they'll be in with us next Wednesday.
They are gonna postpone that vote.
They're gonna postpone that though. Okay. So that's, then, so that's the schedule of meetings is, and then I can get in and, Tina and Joe can, add on to it. So basically, based on the revenue projections, they're looking at a potential gap of $2.5 million between their total request and what might be available, to them through the revenue that's gonna be available throughout the town to fund all our groups and departments. And they are exploring how to address that gap in various ways of restructuring their requests, delaying some requests, exploring a possible early retirement incentive package, which I think actually went out today. And other types of things, and they'll report back to us next Tuesday night with further information. I think of the 2.5. In round numbers, they had sort of identify 1.4 of things that right now they can address through it, and then between now and next Tuesday, they were gonna come back with the other 1.1 million. And so that's where we're fluid and we're in progress, and that's where it stands. But I don't know if you got him.
Yeah, I agree. That the only other observation, I mean, clearly it's a strain right now on the school committee. I think, the superintendent is really reaching to find where the additional reductions can come from. And, difficult situation, I think, right now that he's working through between now and Tuesday.
You remind, one other thing is that there, as you know, we have a separate budget for IT, which encompasses both the school IT and the townwide IT, and which is a result of the changes that we made last year, and the amount that's allocated for the IT budget, I'll call it for lack of a better term. that the request for that is not being reduced, and so in other words, that's staying as it is. It's just the school request that is being reduced.
The school piece of
The
the
school
total
piece of it.
IT budget is what you.
No, the school
No, the
budget,
school budget.
the IT
independent
but, the IT budget encompassing school and the town is, that request is not being reduced.
I think if you carve that out, then isn't the increase about 7% that was requested?
If you take that part out, right? So in other words, the total request was 7% from the schools and about 0.5% on the IT side.
In using their definition, how much of the increase do they consider level funding?
Well, wow, how you want to use level funding?
I know they use
Wait,
it, they use it liberally, but I appreciate that.
I mean, I think that basically the total request, I think what will be kept would be the amount that's being allocated for salary increases.
Yeah.
And then other things, program changes or additions would be the ones that are,
I think there's a literacy program that they're changing, so that's not necessarily, that's it, so.
but that's how I describe it. So that's what we have to report, and we'll know more when we meet with them next Tuesday night, and then obviously when we're with them next Wednesday.
And where are they with the teacher contracts? Is that?
Once it started.
That's very early.
So it's in the budget, the request is what they hope to be able to settle at.
Okay,
That
that
was-
was, that was where I was going.
Yeah.
So it
Absolutely.
could throw it off
Right.
or less.
That's what we gotta know, yeah, that's what we have.
Okay, anybody else on any
That's what people think.
bylaws? No.
No,
You haven't met?
No, we haven't met.
Large
I mean, we
house-
did once, but
Large house hasn't met.
no, that's gonna be a monthly.
Okay, and
We haven't met beyond.
what you
Reported
already
last
reported, and we are meeting next Tuesday evening, I think, although maybe that is, time is shifting, for these, I can't even say it.
It's not just.
No, it is at 6. Okay, I wasn't sure because it seemed to be,
Oh, sorry about that.
no, that's fine.
The planning board is 7:30, so thank you.
Okay,
7:50.
so
Are you ready to entertain a motion to adjourn?
Just quickly, the Martin Luther King Day celebration is Monday. I'm part of the Human Rights Committee. We're putting that together with NDI, so it's gonna be at the high school. I think it's our 15th year doing it, so if anybody can attend, it's really a
It's a great.
joyful celebration, which I think we all need right now, so I'm hoping to see you guys there on Monday.
what time is that?
I think it starts at 10. And I'm in charge of coffee, so. It's a
So we
reason to
put our
go.
request
Free
in now?
coffee, free coffee from Starbucks, so if nothing else, you get a free cup of coffee.
Great.
I would make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Karen, can I put a nomination?
Great, the consultant talking on the phone.